The boy was crying beside the old tree, small hands shaking, tears falling, but no sound reached his own silent world. People in the park stared with confusion, wondering why a rich man's son looked so afraid on such a sunny day. His father stood a few steps away, expensive suit, worried eyes, but still not understanding what his child needed. Since birth, the boy could not hear, and words always came late between them, love trapped behind quiet walls. The father tried everything money could buy, doctors, devices, therapy rooms, yet something inside his son stayed distant. Today was supposed to be simple, just fresh air and time together, a father trying again to feel close. But the boy's cries grew stronger, face red, fingers gripping the tree bark like he was warning about something. The father knelt, asking softly, but the child only shook his head, fear clear in eyes too young for worry. Around them, strangers whispered, thinking it was just another spoiled rich child throwing tears for attention again. No one saw the panic hidden in those small hands, or the message he could not send through broken sound. A few steps away stood a quiet little girl, watching closely, eyes sharp, like she understood more than anyone there. And in the next moment, she would reveal a truth that would change how this father saw his son forever. The little girl stepped forward slowly, not afraid like the others, her eyes fixed on the boy's trembling hands. She didn't look at the father first, only at the child, as if his fear was louder to her than any spoken word. Gently, she touched the tree bark where his fingers pointed, then suddenly pulled her hand back in alarm. A thin crack ran down the trunk, deep and fresh, the heavy branch above them hanging by fragile wood fibers. The wind moved softly, but it was enough, and the branch gave a quiet shift that most people failed to notice. The girl waved her arms urgently, shouting for everyone to move, her voice sharp enough to cut through chatter. The father looked up at last, heart dropping as he saw the danger his son had been trying to show all along. In one fast motion, he grabbed the boy and stepped back just as the branch crashed down where they had stood. Dust and leaves burst into the air, people screaming now, shock spreading through the crowd like sudden fire. The boy clung to his father tightly, small chest shaking, eyes wide but filled with relief instead of fear. The father's hands trembled as he held him, realizing his son had seen what he himself had completely missed. And for the first time he understood that silence had never meant weakness, only a different way of seeing. The crowd slowly gathered around, whispers rising, everyone staring at the fallen branch that could have ended a life. The father knelt down, still holding his son, eyes wet, guilt and gratitude mixing in a storm inside his chest. He kept replaying the moment, how he almost ignored the warning again, how close he came to losing everything. The little girl stood nearby, quiet now, watching the boy as if making sure he was truly safe this time. Their eyes met for a second, and something passed between them, a silent understanding no one else could read. A teacher rushed over, breathless, asking what happened, but the father could barely find his voice to answer. He looked at his son, really looked, seeing not a problem to fix, but a world he had never tried to enter. Tears slid down without shame, because fear had washed away the pride he once wore like heavy armor. He whispered, "I'm sorry, not for the branch, but for all the times he failed to understand his child." The boy didn't speak, but he leaned forward, resting his forehead against his father's shoulder in quiet comfort. Around them, noise returned, but inside that small hug, a broken bridge between two hearts began to rebuild. And the father knew this moment, born from danger, would change how he loved his son forever. At the hospital, doctors checked the boy carefully while his father refused to step away, fear tightening his chest badly. The machines made soft sounds, yet louder in his mind was the memory of his son crying alone behind that tree today. He held the tiny hand gently, a hand he once brushed away while chasing meetings, profits, and endless deals. Every second beside that bed felt like judgment, like life showing him the bill for love he failed to give. Outside, the little girl waited quietly, unsure if people like her were even allowed to stand in places like this. The father walked out slowly, eyes wet, pride broken, gratitude replacing the cold distance he once carried. He learned she knew sign language just to help a deaf classmate, never expecting it would save a life someday. That small kindness hit harder than any business loss because it exposed the father he had failed to be. Strangers had given his child understanding, while he only gave toys, money, and an empty chair at dinner. He promised right there to change with actions, not speeches, to earn back the trust in his son's eyes. Through the glass, the boy watched him, confusion fading, as if sensing love finally trying to come home. For once, the father ignored calls and power, choosing to stay still, learning that presence is the truest wealth. That night, the father sat beside his son's bed, watching each breath like it was the most precious gift on earth. The room was quiet, but inside him, years of regret spoke loudly about moments he chose work over family again. He remembered birthdays missed, school events skipped, promises broken because meetings always felt more urgent. Now none of those deals mattered because one falling branch had shown how fragile everything truly was. His son woke slowly and looked at him, eyes searching, as if unsure whether this presence would stay. The father smiled softly and signed clumsy words he had just learned, hands shaking but heart fully open. The boy stared in surprise, then reached forward, touching his father's hands like testing if this was real. Tears filled the father's eyes because this small touch felt bigger than every success he ever celebrated. He signed again, slower this time, saying he was sorry for the silence he created between them for years. The boy leaned into him, head resting on his chest, forgiving without words, like children often do. In that quiet hospital room, a billionaire learned a lesson no money could ever buy or replace. Love was not in providing everything. It was in being there when fear made a small heart tremble. The next morning, the father canceled meetings again, shocking his staff who had never seen him choose home over deals. He walked beside his son in the hospital garden, not leading, not pulling, but matching his slow, careful steps. The little girl visited with her guardian, shy smile, not knowing she had become part of this family's story. The father knelt to thank her again, this time asking her to teach him the signs his son used every day. She showed him patiently, small hands moving with confidence, bridging a gap years of money never could. His son watched them together, eyes bright, seeing effort where once there had only been distance. For the first time, the father laughed without checking his phone, fully present in a simple human moment. He arranged support for the girls' school quietly, not for attention, but because gratitude demanded action. The boy held both their hands, a small circle of connection formed by kindness, not status or power. Nurses nearby smiled softly, seeing a different kind of recovery happening beyond the hospital charts. The father understood something clear. Saving his son once meant little if he lost him emotionally again. So he chose daily presence, knowing love must be practiced, not assumed, especially in a silent world. Months later, the mansion no longer echoed with distance, but with soft laughter the father once thought he had no time for. He now signed contracts after dinner, not before, because his son's smile had become the only success that mattered. They practiced sign language every night, hands moving slowly, mistakes turning into shared jokes instead of shame. The little girl visited often, no longer a stranger, but a sister in spirit who had unlocked a father's sleeping heart. The father funded a school program for deaf children, quietly, remembering how helpless he once felt in silence. He kept the old video saved, not to relive pain, but to remember the day truth broke his pride wide open. His son grew more confident, knowing his father now listened with eyes, not just ears that never understood him. One evening, the boy signed, "I'm not crying anymore," and the father had to blink away tears of relief. Wealth once built high walls around them, but love built doors, and humility finally taught him how to open them. The girl smiled watching them, proof that kindness from the smallest hands can reshape the biggest lives. Regret had started the journey, but daily effort carried it forward into something stronger than guilt alone. And in that home, silence was no longer lonely, because love had finally learned how to speak without sound. The father often stood at his office window now, not admiring the skyline, but remembering the day he almost lost his son. Success still came, money still flowed, but none of it felt louder than the quiet sound of his child breathing at night. He learned that presence is a language too, one his son understood clearly even without hearing a single word. At dinner, phones stayed away, meetings waited, because family time was no longer something he could afford to miss. The boy grew braver at school, signing proudly, no longer hiding behind fear of being different from others. Other parents approached them for advice, and the father spoke honestly about guilt, mistakes, and second chances. The little girl's family became part of their lives, two worlds joined by one moment of courage and truth. On the mansion wall hung a simple frame, not of awards, but of that day that changed everything forever. It reminded him that love sometimes arrives through strangers, carrying lessons pride would never let us see. His son signed one night, "You understand me now," and that silent sentence healed years of distance between them. The father kissed his forehead gently, knowing redemption is not one act, but a promise kept every single day. And their home proved that when hearts finally listen, even silence can become the loudest form of love.